David Sorensen from StopWorldControl.com. In this video I present to you truths and realities that are extremely difficult to comprehend. Information that will shock us to the core, because it challenges everything we believe. It turns our world upside down, and it reveals something so evil that it is almost incomprehensible. Yet it is the truth. If we want this world to become a better place, then we cannot afford to deny obvious realities. We must have the courage and the sincerity to face truth. I invite you to have this courage and sincerity when you watch this video. It will be difficult. It will be very challenging. But it will also expose something extremely nefarious in this world that every human being needs to be aware of. Several former members of the Israeli Defense Force have come forth because they are extremely concerned about what is going on in Israel. They testify how the military in Israel is the most advanced high-tech army in the entire world. They also reveal how the borders between Israel and Gaza are the most heavily secured borders anywhere on earth. High-tech sensors alert the Israeli Defense Force from the moment that even a small animal approaches the borders. Yet hundreds of Hamas fighters were not only able to approach the border, but they blew up the fences. They entered Israeli territory and started destroying homes and burning down villages and killing Israeli people without any semblance of defense by the Israeli military. Turns out that shortly before this attack, the government had ordered the removal of all military presence from that area. Hamas was literally given a free pass to enter and start their operation. In the next videos, you will hear former members of the Israeli Defense Force explain that something very, very, very concerning is going on in Israel.
שתפו את הסרטון הזה כמה שיותר, כי תקשיבו רגע, אני שירתתי כסמב"צית חי"ר במהלך מלחמת צוק איתן, אני שירתתי באוגדת עזה. כל השירות שלי היה תומכת לחימה בזמן מלחמת צוק איתן שאז הייתה באוגדת עזה. תקשיבו לי ותקשיבו לי טוב. אין מצב בעולם שיכולה להיות כזאת התקרבות לגדר, אוקיי? מבלי שאנחנו לא נדע מזה. התצפיתניות יושבות בבונקרים 4 שעות, הן לא יכולות לעשות ככה, הן מול מסך. לא יכול להיות מצב, שום מצב, שהיו מעירים אותי בלילה על יונה, על חסידה שהתקרבה לגדר, על מקק שעבר מתחת לגדר, היו מקפיצים את כל הגזרה. איך נכנסו עם טרקטורים, 400 איש ואף אחד לא שם לב.
October 7th, 2023. This is Efrat Fenigzon and I'm here to share an update from Israel-Hamas war, which started this morning. Apparently, Israeli defense forces that were supposed to be around Gaza were placed around the West Bank because of security concerns, so that the Gaza envelope was left unoccupied with military. They say around 60 to 80% of that area was left without the IDF forces that were supposed to be there. A year ago, there was a military operation in Gaza to prepare for such events, and ongoingly there are trainings for these kind of scenarios. This raises serious questions for me anyway about Israeli intelligence. What happened? 2 years ago, there was a successful deployment of underground barriers with sensors to alert exactly on these kind of terrorist breaches. Israel has one of the most advanced and high-tech armies. How come there was zero response to the border and fence breaching? I cannot understand that. Personally, I served in the IDF 25 years ago in the intelligence forces. There's no way, in my view, that Israel did not know of what's coming. A cat moving alongside the fence is triggering all forces. So this What happened to the strongest army in the world? How come border crossings were wide open? Something is very wrong here. Something is very strange. This chain of events is very unusual and not typical for the Israeli defense system. The current government is highly corrupt in my view, while the previous one was no better. I don't care about having a popular opinion. I care about exposing evil forces wherever and whomever they are. So to me, this surprise attack seems like a planned operation on all fronts. If I was a conspiracy theorist, I would say that this feels like the work of the deep state. It feels like the people of Israel and the people of Palestine have been sold once again to the higher powers that be. At the same time, this is still very, very difficult to fathom.
How come the strongest army, the strongest intelligence, the most sophisticated intelligence in the world, in Israel, makes it possible for few hundred Hamas fighters to enter Israel and make all of this happen, while in that area the Hamas fighters did not meet Israeli army or any defense or any protection or anything, as if the Israeli government was planning to offer the Hamas fighters this whole area on a silver plate. This, is not logical. Israel has the most sophisticated intelligence, has a strong army, the strongest in the Middle East, and allow something like this. So there is more behind it. Israel has sacrificed its own people, sacrificed the civilians on the borders of Gaza, took away the protection, took away the army, and allowed Hamas to do what they did.
The following footage was released by Hamas. Here we can see them place explosives on the fences that are extremely heavily secured with high tech, but not a sign of Israeli response. They blow up the fences on several places. Here you have an aerial view of how they are breaking through and destroying the infrastructure. We can even see how they are literally entering onto Israeli territory with their vehicles full of armed soldiers. And not a single attempt of the Israeli Defense Force to stop them in any way. They literally received a free pass to enter into Israel. They can even drive on the roads of Israel. This is another video released by Hamas showing how they are able to blow up the security fences and enter Israel unhindered. We have to understand that this is not some massive army invading Israel, it's basically a low number of terrorists. The incredible, powerful military of Israel could have stopped them in a breeze, but they didn't. So what is really going on here? Why was there no response from the Israeli Defense Force when armed soldiers from Hamas entered Israeli territory, even blowing up the fences and going deep into Israel and starting to burn down villages and kill people and kidnap people? Why was the Israeli military removed from that whole area right before this attack? Why was the mainstream news media instructed not to be honest to the public, and why did they wait for 12 hours to inform Israel. There is clearly something very, very nefarious going on here, a criminal operation at government level of the worst kind. The question is, what is their agenda? What is the purpose? I believe that the answer is given by this letter that was sent by the government coalition in Israel to Prime Minister Netanyahu. It shows that they demand an immediate invasion into Gaza and a complete seizing of control of that whole area that belonged for the past decades to the Palestinian people. And indeed we see that immediately Israel responds and does something that they have been wanting to do for decades. A complete all-out attack on Gaza, where 2.5 million innocent Palestinian people live. Families like you and me, mommies, daddies, children, grandfathers, grandmothers, just beautiful people. They are being bombarded, they are being murdered en masse. This is homicide of the worst kind. And this invasion by Hamas is the perfect excuse to accomplish this.
بس المربع كله المربع اللي قالوا يخلوه ضربوه.
What every person in the world should know is that more than half of the 2.3 million people in Gaza are children younger than the age of 15. This means that Israel is now bombing more than 1 million young children.
دمار شامل وواسع في هذا المكان. عشرات الصواريخ تقريبا 50 غارة كانت فجر اليوم على هذا المكان على بيوت المواطنين.
اسحب شهيد 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 اللي عاش في قلب المخيم، في قلب المخيم. ننقل لكم الصورة من قلب مخيم جبالة. نحن الآن في الترانس تحديدا، شهداء بالعشرات وجرحى. هذا هو ما يحدث الآن في غزة في مخيم جبالة تحديدا. هذا سوبر ماركت رابعة سابقا.
The destruction that is being unleashed on 2.5 million families, mummies, daddies, children, grandfathers, grandmothers, uncles, nieces. I use these words to get my point through. These are people who live there in Gaza, and now Israel is wiping them out. They are destroying thousands and thousands of families under the excuse of a Hamas attack. On top of that, Israel cut off all water, power, gas and food from these 2.5 million people. Here we can see utter darkness in the entire Gaza area. Hundreds of thousands of families have no drinking water, have no electricity, no gas and no food. What is really disturbing is that less than 2 weeks before Israel launched their attack on Gaza with the purpose of permanently eliminating it, Netanyahu showed a map during the General Assembly at the United Nations. This map is called the New Middle East. When you look at Israel, then the Palestinian regions have been completely removed. There is no sign anymore of any Palestinian presence on the map of the New Middle East that Netanyahu showed less than 2 weeks before they launched their attack on Gaza. With every false flag operation, it is always the same principle. Some entity wants to commit a horrendous crime, but they don't want to be blamed for it. So they have to use another entity to shift the blame to. In this case, it is very clear. They use Hamas. Hamas is supposedly the bad actor here. And all Israel does supposedly is defend itself. So now they have the right to do something which they have wanted to do for decades. Completely eradicate the whole Gaza Strip and commit horrendous homicide on the Palestinian people. The next question we then have is, why would Hamas cooperate with Israel? In the next clip we probably find the answer. US Senator Ron Paul exclaimed in the US government that Hamas is actually an organization that is set up by Israel, financed by Israel, to work for Israel.
You know, Hamas, if you look at the history, you'll find out that Hamas was encouraged and really started by Israel because they wanted Hamas to counteract Yasser Arafat.
What Senator Ron Paul said is confirmed by a man called Ronald Bernard. He worked at a high level in the so-called financial elites, the most wealthy and most powerful in this world, who control the world theater behind the scenes. He explains how terrorist organizations are essentially funded by the same sources that also fund the organizations that supposedly fight those terrorists.
Which is not surprising, considering they are involved in the flows of money. Those are your clients. You also have governments to deal with, multinationals. You have to deal with secret services, and what they now call terrorist organizations. You get all of the groups that are involved with the big money as clients. Then you start seeing the connections, so they might be compartmentalized as you just mentioned, regarding knowledge. But because I am in the middle, I see how they relate to another. You see the money coming from this place, then going to that place, etc. You keep gaining information and thereby an overview of what is really going on.
So do you have to serve and keep all of those groups happy, including terrorist organizations? You were trying to keep everybody happy?
Yes.
My God.
That was my job.
Keeping all the balls in the air.
Yes, indeed. So one of the things that I found out, I did not know that before, but now I do, is about secret services. You think they are there to serve and protect a people, country, etc., but they actually turn out to be the criminal organizations, to be more precise. The system is heavily so. We are talking about financing wars, creating wars, so basically creating a lot of misery in this world. So, lots of conflict. And then I think to myself, if only people knew what the world is really like. Secret services will stop at nothing. Nothing. But they also have their flows of money, because if they are trading in drugs or weapons or, for that matter, people, all that money has to go somewhere. Everything has to be financed.
You say if, but you could confirm they are doing this?
All of them. All of them.
You can view the full interview with Ronald Bernard on the website stopworldcontrol.com/Bernard. He explains much more about what's really going on in our world, behind the scenes of the puppet theater that is put up for the public. Because it is a puppet theater indeed.
This surprise attack seems like a planned operation on all fronts.
אין מצב בעולם שיכולה להיות כזאת התקרבות לגדר, אוקיי? מבלי שאנחנו לא נדע מזה.
Israel has sacrificed its own people, sacrificed the civilians on the borders of Gaza.
Since they started their invasion of the land of Palestine more than 80 years ago, several hundreds of thousands of people have been murdered by the Israeli forces. And as you can see on this map, they have gradually been stealing all their land, their farms, their vineyards, their homes, all their possessions. And then ultimately they locked up these people in Gaza, which is the largest open air prison in the world. with the highest suicide rate in the world, because life is so unbearable there. There is something very important that we all need to realize concerning Hamas. Hamas was created so that Israel could play victim. Israel is the actual aggressor who invaded a peaceful region, murdered hundreds of thousands of people, stole all their land, their homes, their farms, their vineyards, all their possessions, and locked them up in open-air prisons and in areas where these people are terrorized every day of their life. Still, a majority of humanity looks at Israel as if they are the victims. That is the success of Hamas. And this is how psychological operations work that are run by intelligence agencies to manipulate mankind. Here you see footage from Palestinian people before the invasion by the Zionists. These are no terrorists, these are no dangerous people, these are just happy families, just like you and me. A former soldier from the Israeli Defense Force explains how they literally terrorized these millions of people on a daily basis.
What most haunts you and your conscience about what you did in your time as a soldier?
For me, it's the routine way we control the Palestinians, right? A Palestinian can wake up in the morning and not know if he will be at work on time, go to sleep, not know if soldiers will invade his home. We basically control the most simple and basic elements of life.
It's designed to break down the population of Palestinians and show them who's in charge and humiliate them on a daily basis.
Exactly. How can we make 2.5 million Palestinians in the West Bank to feel that they cannot lift their head up? We will make them understand that we control their lives. The segregated roads and the settlements and so forth, they exist all around the occupied territories. Military activity, home invasions, patrols, digital surveillance, they exist here and they exist all over the West Bank. The difference in Hebron is that in a very short walk, we can see examples of all of it.
All of it.
All of
we
it.
saw all of it.
The United Nations says that 251 Israelis lost their life compared to 5,590 Palestinians that were killed between 2008 and 2020. A member of the European Parliament from Ireland, however, says that the numbers are much higher.
More than 150,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed or injured in Gaza and the West Bank since 2008. 33,000 of those were children.
But what is truly behind the invasion of the land of Palestine and the stealing of the land of millions of people and murdering and torturing them? What is the deeper agenda behind all of this? We find the answer when we look at the entities who are behind the establishing of the State of Israel. It is the family of the Rothschilds. On their own official website, they brag how they are the ones who financed the rebuilding of Israel. They are the ones who made Israel possible. So who are the Rothschilds? And why did they spend billions of dollars to invest in the building of a new political and military state of Israel? The Rothschilds are amongst the most wealthy people in the world. Their fortune is estimated to be several trillions of dollars. That is several thousands of billions of dollars. That makes them basically the most powerful people in the whole financial and banking system of this world. They operate, for example, from within the city of London, not to be confused with London City. London City is the city that we all know. It is London, where people live and where tourists visit. The city of London, however, is a small area of 1 square mile within the heart of London City. The city of London is the financial center of the entire world. And there is something highly significant about the City of London. This small area of 1 square mile is a sovereign state. It is not subject to the laws of England, nor the United Kingdom, nor the royal family. On the contrary, the City of London actually rules supreme over them. The City of London is the continuation of what we all know as the British Empire. The British Empire attempted to gain world domination. They still essentially own a vast portion of the world, like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, several African nations and many more. The City of London is the headquarters of all the big banks in this world, as well as the headquarters of Freemasonry. The crest or the coat of arms of the City of London shows 2 dragons, and then the helmet of a knight with a wing of a dragon. The Latin creed translated into English means Lord guide us. So they show dragons and they say Lord guide us. The dragon in mythology, but also in spirituality, for example in the Holy Scriptures, represents the personification of evil that wants to deceive and rule over all of humanity. The ancient dragon is the symbol of Satan or the devil. It is significant that the City of London is surrounded by 14 statues of a dragon. So the dragon is the #1 symbol within the City of London. This brings us to another element of the Rothschilds. They are known for their involvement in a religion called Luciferianism or Satanism. Baroness Philippine Rothschild often wore jewelry that depicts the symbol of Satanism, a horned goat. She even had jewels that simply showed the head of Satan. On this picture we can see Baron Jacob Rothschild posing in front of a famous painting called Satan Calls His Armies Forth from Hell. He poses alongside one of their favorite artists, Marina Abramovich. This lady organizes very strange parties for the elites. Here you see some images of these parties that are called spirit cooking. They basically celebrate the practice of human sacrifice and cannibalism. In the next video you can see a spirit cooking dinner organized by Marina Abramovich, one of the favorite artists of the Rothschilds, who founded the State of Israel. I need to warn you, what you're about to see is extremely graphic and complicit and deeply disturbing. On December 2, 1972, Marie-Hélène de Rothschild organized a surrealist ball at the Château de Verrières in France, one of their castles. These are some images from their party. It again celebrates human sacrifice, which is at the heart of Satanism. Here you can see more art from Abramovich, a good friend of the Rothschilds. She celebrates all the symbolism of Satanism. The snake, the devil's horns, even child abuse. In 2017, the Rothschilds chose an artist from among thousands of artists in our world to decorate their sailing boat during the Lascaux project. From all the existing artists in our world, they handpicked one particular man, Cleo Peterson. Here you can see some of his art. It always shows dark entities that are torturing white figures. Always darkness torturing the light, evil ruling over good. He shows scenes of violent rape, violent murder, violent slavery, and violent suppression. It is highly significant that the Rothschilds picked this artist to decorate their sailing boat. At the beginning of this video, I warned you that this would be extremely disturbing information. And I'm sure that most people are not aware that Israel was founded by blatant Satanists. But this brings us back to the original question. Why did they invade Palestine? Why did they erect the state of Israel? Everyone who is informed knows that there has always been an agenda for world domination all throughout world history. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is one of the most basic realities of human history. There has been one world empire after the other. And for some weird reason, there are many people in our time who dismiss the reality of an agenda for world domination, which is dazzling. It's almost insane to think that there would no longer be an agenda for world domination in our time, because this has always been the red line all throughout human history. The only question is, who are the people today that aim for world domination? Well, there is, for example, the World Economic Forum, who make it very clear on their own website that they are striving for global governance. They want to control the whole world. They also strive for internet governance and corporate governance. They want to establish governance over every aspect of human society. So here you have it. It is out in the open. Well, the Rothschilds are among the families who are behind the World Economic Forum, which is basically a public entity that is backed up by the City of London and by these high-level financial elites. Now, in the past decades, there have been extremely disturbing revelations about what's going on within these financial elites. The main theme that has been exposed by innumerable insiders, and I mean surviving victims or eyewitnesses or former employees, and even former directors of the FBI and the CIA, and former police officers and detectives and commanders from the military, and former agents and officers from intelligence services. All of these people have been revealing one same horrific reality. They have been exposing to our world how there is an organized system of child abuse and child trafficking and even child torture and child ritual sacrifice that is happening within these financial elites. There is, for example, the whistleblower Ronald Bernard. He was operating at the highest level within these financial circles, and he was moving trillions of dollars. He exposed how at the very highest level of these financial elites there is indeed this religion called Luciferianism. And he joined into their satanic masses for a while because there was a lot of fun. Sex, drugs and rock and roll, you could say. But then he was invited to partake into the ritual of child sacrifice. And he was promised that if he would join into that, he would receive unimaginable financial opportunities. He would become wealthier than his wildest dreams. Here is a short clip from the testimony of Ronald Bernard.
But then at some point, I was invited, which is why I'm telling you all this, to participate in sacrifices abroad. That was the breaking point. Children.
You were asked to do that?
Yes. And I couldn't do that.
Would you like to stop for a moment, by the way?
No. And then I started to slowly break down. I lived through quite a lot as a child myself, and this really touched me deeply. Everything changed. But that is the world I found myself in.
What Ronald Bernard has revealed to our world is confirmed by an incredible large number of other whistleblowers. I am personally in touch with several people who came out of these elites, and all of them say the same thing. And this brings us back to Israel. This brings us back to what is really going on in the Middle East. All these people who came forth from these financial elites testify that their ultimate goal is to set up a one world government, global governance, and they want the headquarters to be in Jerusalem. And this has an ancient spiritual reason. I won't go into that right now, but we have to understand that everything has a background. But they specifically want Jerusalem to be their headquarters. Now, for many Christians, this will be extremely shocking to hear, and I totally understand that, but I ask you to hear me out. Everything I present here is solid evidence. It can be researched by anyone, and all the facts are available for every person who has the courage to look at these facts. So why is nobody aware of this? Why is the entire Christian community worldwide, which consists of roughly 2 billion people, why do they support the state of Israel blindly? Let us go back into history a little bit. For many centuries, Palestine was a very peaceful region where Muslims, Jews and Christians lived in harmony with one another. There was no hatred, there was no war. This is something unnatural that is created by higher powers in politics and in the financial world. But these people had no issue with one another whatsoever. It's only when the Rothschilds started investing into establishing this state that hatred was artificially incited between different people groups. So after centuries of living happily in peace and in harmony, suddenly there was this invasion by forces that are called Zionists or Zionism. Zionism is indeed the philosophy or the movement of people who want to establish a new Israel as the center of a one-world government. In order to accomplish their goal, they, however, had to do one very important thing. They needed the support of the worldwide Christian community. They needed the churches on their side. So, in the 19th century, before Israel was founded, the Rothschilds worked closely with several people in Christianity. They attracted a man called Cyrus Scofield. He was a convicted criminal lawyer, an expert in fraud and forgery. He was asked to create a new Bible, the Scofield Study Bible. This was the first Bible in all of history to contain hundreds of footnotes. In these footnotes, a new doctrine was introduced into the American Evangelical Church, which says that there was to come a new political military Israel, and that would be the place where the Messiah would come to rule the world. And they said that would be the fulfillment of the promise that God had made to Abraham, and that would also be the fulfillment of the promise that Christ would return to earth. This Bible was then spread all throughout America through the Moody Bible Institute, and it became the foundation for the current day evangelical theology. Nobody was aware that this Bible was directly funded by Satanists and that it served the agenda to get Christianity on their side for establishing a new Israel that would become the headquarters of their one world government. And again, I know that all this sounds outrageous to many people who have never heard this before, but you can research this. And I encourage you to do your due diligence. I've studied this for decades and I know what I'm talking about, but it's very difficult sometimes when you talk to people who are not informed, who have simply accepted a certain mindset, who have blindly believed that and who repeat it to everybody else without ever doing their research. But all this is historical fact. The Scofield Study Bible was published by the Oxford University Press, which was owned by the Rothschilds. And this whole theology was first written out by John Darby, whose family owned the most haunted castle in the world, Leap Castle, where 150 dead bodies were found in the cellars and where satanic masses were held. John Darby used all kinds of occult terms in his religious writings. He was involved in many secret societies and occult groups. And he is the one who educated Cyrus Scofield, but John Darby was an employee of the Rothschilds. He worked for the East India Company. The Scofield Study Bible literally said that everyone who supported this new Israel would be blessed by God, and everyone who did not support it would be cursed by God. So fear and intimidation was used to force Christians to be on their side, and they succeeded. In our time, the vast majority of Christianity believes thoroughly that this new political military state of Israel is indeed the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham. But they haven't got the slightest clue what's really going on here. The whole violent invasion into the land of Palestine, where Muslims and Christians and Jews had been living peacefully together for thousands of years, is based on a misunderstanding of the promise that God made to Abraham in the Old Testament. God told Abraham that he would receive land, that a great people would come forth from him. But one of the experts of the Jewish religion, who later became the Apostle Paul, wrote to the Jews in his time, who were called the Hebrews, that Abraham essentially was not promised and was not looking for a stretch of desert. He was looking for a heavenly land built by the hand of God, something far more beautiful, far more profound, far more glorious. This was confirmed by Jesus Christ, who was the Messiah and who came to fulfill all the promises of God to Abraham and to his descendants. But he surprised everybody by saying, "My kingdom is not of this world." He said, "My kingdom is not visible with the human eye. My kingdom," he said, "doesn't work with weapons. It doesn't wage war." He said, "My kingdom is not on a geographical location on earth." He said, "My kingdom is a heavenly realm. And you can only see it through the Spirit of God. You can only enter it when you are born from above by the Spirit." And he said, "My kingdom is among you. It is inside of you." So God is not interested in a political military nation that wages war and kills people. Jesus Christ is called the Prince of Peace. He's the one who removes all hatred and violence between people and who makes people brothers. That's why in the New Testament it says, "In Christ there is neither Jew nor Gentile." There is no more hostility or division. There is one new man, one new creation in Christ. Those who accept Christ, they are the ones who can enter into this kingdom of God. It has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with military warfare. It has nothing to do with hatred between one people group and another people group. That is in fact the exact opposite of this. But we've all been told something entirely different. We've been told by the Rothschilds through the C.I. Scofield Study Bible, which has spread all around the world and which was unquestioningly accepted by all of Christianity, that it is all about a political military nation. which is the opposite of what Christ said. He said, even to the Samaritan women at the well, for those who know what scriptures say, he said, the time is gone, the time is over, where people worship God in the city of Jerusalem. He said, now the true worshippers will worship God in spirit, because God is spirit, and that's the worship that he longs for. And then the Apostle Paul explained to the Galatians, he said, guys, understand this. You guys are not children from the earthly Jerusalem. You are not children from something worldly. You are children, you come forth from the heavenly Jerusalem. The heavenly Jerusalem is your mother. It's a heavenly kingdom, Jesus Christ said. In the Old Covenant there was a physical Israel, a physical Jerusalem, a stone temple, but in 70 AD that was all destroyed. That was judged by the Almighty God. And then in the New Testament it says that we are now the temple of the living God. He dwells in us. We are his dwelling place, and his spirit builds us as homes where God can dwell. And through us he brings healing and deliverance to the world. So we have two completely opposite mindsets. In the time of Jesus, the Jews wanted a political and military kingdom. That's why the apostles joined Christ. That's why Jude, who betrayed Christ, followed him. He expected Christ to restore Israel in a military, political way. And when Jesus didn't do that, and when it was clear that he was going to be killed by the Jews, then Jude betrayed him. He thought, this guy is not going to restore a political military Israel. He is in no way anything that I thought he would be. He's not going to be our world leader who will bring peace over all of humanity from Israel. So Jude betrayed him, and that caused Christ to be murdered. The apostles also left Christ. They were disillusioned. But when the Spirit of God came on Pentecost, all the Christians suddenly began to understand, starting with the apostles, what Christ had been explaining to them. This is not about a political military land. This is about a heavenly land. This is about the reign of the Most High God in your heart, where you are transformed on the inside, where heaven comes to dwell in your heart, and you become a completely different person, not through a religion, not through something political or social or military or whatever, but by becoming a child. Christ said, if you become like a little child, you can enter into the kingdom of heaven. So the promises that God had made to Abraham and his descendants were fulfilled in Christ. God never spoke about a stretch of desert that would be his ultimate fulfillment. He had something far more beautiful, far more glorious. He had a heavenly kingdom, a heavenly nation, people all around the world who love God. And here we come to an incredible misunderstanding concerning what it means to be a Jew or an Israelite or a descendant of Abraham. Who was Abraham? What is a real Jew? Listen carefully. Even if you're not a Christian, even if you're not religious in any way, this is extremely interesting and fascinating, and it explains the core of what's going on in Israel and the agenda for world domination. So this relates to all of us, no matter our background and beliefs. So please keep watching, because a lot more will be revealed. Abraham was somebody who was faithful to the creator of life. He did not join into the demon worship and the human sacrifice and all the sorcery and magic of his surroundings. He remained faithful to the creator of all life. That's why God revealed himself to Abraham and said, Abraham, you will be the father of all the people throughout all of history who will be just like you. They will walk in your footsteps in a way that they will also love me despite evil surroundings in their culture. They will be faithful to me despite perversion and wickedness in their nation. He said, a great people will come forth from you, and they will come from every tribe, every tongue, every nation. And this will be called Israel. Israel means Prince of God, or in other words, royal child of the creator of heaven and earth. So Israel was never meant to be a political nation. It was that for a short period to show that that doesn't work out, because the people of Israel who came after Abraham, they left the Creator. They turned back to darkness and they went back to worshipping demons and human sacrifice. You can read that all throughout the scriptures. And God kept sending his prophets to call them back to him, but they always rejected and even murdered them. So God showed a political nation is not my idea. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about physical seed. I'm talking about spiritual seed. I'm talking about people who are circumcised in their heart, who walk with me in the midst of darkness, who are faithful to me surrounded by wickedness, who walk in faith even though their eyes can't see and their mind can't understand. They keep trusting me. That is what it means to be the seed of Abraham. We are like him. We walk like him. We live like him. We walk in his footsteps. And that's why the prophet Isaiah and the apostle Paul clearly said that only a very small portion of ancient Israel was truly Israel. Only those who were truly faithful to God. The vast majority of ancient Israel turned their back to God and were just as wicked and satanic as the other nations who practiced human sacrifice and demon worship and all kinds of magic and sorcery. So Abraham is the father of faith. His seed is not genetic. His seed is spiritual. That's why Christ said the people who listen to the Creator, who listen to God and who do what he says, they are the children of God. They are my brothers and sisters. And that's why the Apostle John said it's impossible to become a child of God by ways of genetics or lineage or by the will of a man. You become a child of God by accepting Christ whom he sent, by believing what God says. Well, in the time of Christ, you had Jews who accepted Christ and you had Jews who rejected him. The Jews who rejected Christ were the ones who wanted a military political kingdom. They wanted to defeat the Romans and establish a military nation that would rule the whole world. They interpreted the scriptures in a very earthly way. Why Christ said it's only by the Spirit of God that you can worship God and that you can understand it. And that's why the Apostle Paul also said we have the mind of Christ. We have the mind of the Spirit who reveals the mysteries of God. And the mystery of God was that the promises that he had been making were fulfilled in Christ. And that's also why it says that all the promises of God are yes and amen in Christ, not in a political military nation. So this is in a nutshell what the Bible really says. This is also the core, the heart of the Christian faith. God dwells in the heart of man. He doesn't dwell in a temple built by man. He dwells in the heart of man, which is built by the Spirit of God. Our life, our mind, our thoughts, our actions, our entire existence becomes a home for the Creator to express his love and to show his love to the rest of humanity. And there is no racism in God. He is not a respecter of persons. The mindset that being a Jew means that you have some kind of a genetic connection to Abraham, that makes you a racist, because people who think that way say the Jews are better than the rest of humanity. They have the right to slaughter and murder and torture and imprison and rob everybody else because they are the chosen people. And that is exactly how the Pharisees were thinking. In scripture we can read that they talked about other nations as being dogs. They said those people are animals. And now with the attack of Hamas on Israel, which is not really Hamas, you know, Hamas is financed by the same people who finance Israel, but the Israeli defense minister literally said those Palestinians, they are human animals. So that is the racist mentality of these people who think that being a Jew means that you are better than other people.
אנחנו מטילים מצור מוחלט על העיר עזה. אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם.
There is a vast contrast between what Christ and the scriptures say and between what was introduced into Christianity. Basically, the doctrine of Zionism goes back to the time of the ancient Israelites, who wanted a political, military Israel that would rule over the world. That's basically that literal interpretation. And they are the ones who murdered Christ. They are the ones who killed all the Christians. They are the ones who slaughtered the apostles, because they did not want the kingdom of heaven in the heart of man. They wanted the political, military fulfillment of the promises of God. So they rejected Christ, they rejected what the apostles preached, they rejected everything that the scriptures truly said. So this is where we come at the core of the issue. And I hope that you are still with me. I've been real fast explaining this as concise as I can, but I invite all the Christians who are watching this video to study the scriptures sincerely. Read the letter of Paul to the Galatians. Read what Christ in the gospel said about the kingdom. He never spoke about a political military reign. He rejected that fiercely. Okay? And Jude betrayed him for that. The Christian church has been severely subverted. Instead of being faithful to what Jesus Christ said, whom they claim to believe, follow and worship, they actually completely diverted from everything Christ has said, and they went back to what the Pharisees said. We need a military, political Israel. When we look at the modern day state of Israel, it becomes crystal clear that it has nothing whatsoever in common with the Israel that God is talking about in Scripture. In Scripture, God says that Israel, Prince of God, royal children of God, is his family, it's his people, those who love him, those who worship him, those who are faithful to him. It is his kiddos, his beloved ones, the apple of his eye, the people that truly belong to God. When you look at the current state of Israel, it is one of the most atheist states in the whole world. The vast majority of Israel fiercely rejects the existence of God. They say that there is no God. Many of them are Freemasons. Israel, in its short existence, has become one of the capitals of sexual perversion worldwide, with the biggest pride parade in the Middle East. It is a safe haven for pedophiles. People who are wanted by the law for child abuse can flee to Israel and they will not be prosecuted there. So this is very powerful evidence that Israel has nothing to do with the true Israel that God was talking about, which is literally the exact opposite of this. God says, love your enemies. We are all brothers. He calls people to live in peace with one another. Israel is the exact opposite of this. It kills millions of people. It murders them. It tortures children in prison. This is unfathomable. There is no connection between this political, military, violent state, which was financed by Satanists, and which is a capital in the world of sexual perversion and one of the most atheist nations in the world, and what God says that Israel is. It is literally the exact opposite. Let me show you something. This is a legit $1 note. How do you know that it's real? Well, because it says so here, right? $1. So you can rest assured that this is a genuine $1 note. That's exactly what's going on with Israel. It's not because somebody assumes an identity or uses a certain name that they are the real thing. This is an authentic $1 note. It doesn't only say $1, but it has all the characteristics. When we look at Israel, we need to look at the characteristics, not just be fooled by the name Israel. Anyone can say, I'm an Israelite, I'm a Jew, or whatever. We have to look at what are the hallmarks of the true Israel according to the Torah, according to the Old Testament and the scriptures. And then we have to look if we can see those characteristics. That's how we determine if something is real. You can't just go around and say, look, this is real because it says so. Using the Star of David and using the name Israel doesn't make you Israel. This is something we really have to understand. And then another key insight I need to share with you is that this is being presented to humanity as an everlasting conflict between one people group and another. Israeli and Palestinians. But that's not what's really going on. As we saw, the entities who are behind both Israel and Hamas, they are the ones who have caused this conflict. They are the ones who initiate this war. Essentially, this is a war between the deep state and all of humanity. And both the Israeli and Palestinian people are victim of this. We are all being fooled by a very powerful and very cunning group of people who operate behind the scenes and who pull on the strings. So this is the mystery of Israel that has been solved. It has nothing to do with what the ancient scriptures say about what Israel is. It is diametrically the opposite of that. It was founded and financed by blatant Satanists who have an agenda for world domination and who want to have the support of the billions of Christians from around the world so that they can succeed in their agenda. I understand that it's extremely shocking if you hear this for the first time, but all this information can be researched. You can find more and more evidence for this when you do your due diligence. I want to invite you to become part of building a better world, where we don't support entities that create war and murder hundreds of thousands and even millions of people. We are not here to make this world a place of horror and terror and fear and destruction. We are here to bring love, justice and goodness amongst all of humanity. This is our purpose. That's why this film was made, to expose an extremely nefarious agenda. Their plan is to incite world war, so that they can use that as an excuse for establishing a one world government, which would then supposedly bring peace. We have the choice to fall into this trap or to open our eyes and have the courage to stand up for what is right and prevent their agenda. I invite you to go to the website stopworldcontrol.com and sign up for our emails. You will learn a lot about the official agenda for world domination and what you can do to be part of preventing this plan. The future is bright and beautiful if we rise up and if we do what it takes to make this world a place of goodness, a place of hope, a place of happiness.
We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method. Unhappily, the danger it poses promises to be of indefinite duration. To meet it successfully, there is call for not so much the emotional and transitory sacrifices of crisis, but rather those which enable us to carry forward steadily, surely, and without complaint, the burdens of a prolonged and complex struggle with liberty the stake.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. Today, no war has been declared, and however fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in the traditional fashion. If you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear, and its presence has never been more imminent. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down. I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
In my former life, I was an insider as much as anybody else. Now I'm being punished for leaving the special club and revealing to you the terrible things that are going on having to do with our country. There is nothing the political establishment will not do, no lie that they won't tell, to hold their prestige and power at your expense. And that's what's been happening. Their financial resources are virtually unlimited. Their political resources are unlimited. Their media resources are unmatched. And most importantly, the depths of their immorality is absolutely unlimited. For them, it's a war. And for them, nothing at all is out of bounds. This is a struggle for the survival of our nation. The corrupt establishment knows that we are a great threat to their criminal enterprise. They know that if we win, their power is gone, and it's returned to you, the people. Will be. The corrupt political establishment is a machine. It has no soul. I knew these false attacks would come. I knew this day would arrive. It's only a question of when. This is not simply another 4-year election. This is a crossroads in the history of our civilization that will determine whether or not we, the people, reclaim control over our government. The only thing that can stop this corrupt machine is you. The only force strong enough to save our country is us. I take all of these slings and arrows gladly for you. I take them for our movement so that we can have our country back. Our great civilization here in America and across the civilized world has come upon a moment of reckoning. I'm doing this for the people and for the movement, and we will take back this country for you, and we will make America great again. Our campaign represents a true existential threat. It's a movement the likes of which we have never in history, in this country, seen before. Never in history.
I'm a wartime president. It's a war. It's a war. Different kind of a war than we've ever had. I know that this is a challenging time for all Americans. We're enduring a great national trial, and we will prove that we can meet the moment. I want to assure the American people that we're doing everything we can each day to confront and ultimately defeat this horrible, invisible enemy. We're at war. In a true sense, we're at war, and we're fighting an invisible enemy.
Our Independence Day is at hand.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
The American populace is facing an unconventional warfare scenario. This is information warfare.
This is a declaration of war. You hear me? David Rothschild, okay? You're not safe anymore. We're tired of your murderous games. I've heard that Evelyn the Rothschild, the family leader, is now quietly hiding in his castle in England. Well, Evelyn, tell your family to stand down. Tell them enough is enough. No genocide. Your family is in danger unless you stop this madness. Time is running out. I don't like to have an angry face just as we approach Christmas. It should be a time now. We have the possibility to have the richest possible boom in the history of civilization. We have the technology to turn the deserts green. We can refill the oceans with fish. We can have world peace. And all that's blocking us is a few dozen old men. Please, everybody, arrest them. What is wrong with you people? We can have world peace. We can have all these good things. We're just being blocked by a tiny group of old men who worship Satan. That's a fact. Please, we must save the planet. Thank you. No, enough.
All ancient civilizations depicted a flat Earth under a dome.
Okay. Now I'm going to say this in English. I have suffered numerous murder attempts. The people who tried to kill me include Henry Kissinger, George Bush Sr., David the Rothschild in Geneva, okay? And the people who are now at the source of the problems in the United States include Frank Carlucci, James Baker, Paul Wolfenson, George Soros, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Timothy Geithner, okay? These people are murderers and criminals. You need to arrest them. If they resist arrest, they are murderers. You must shoot them. You must not let these people be free. This is important. They are planning to start World War III and murder billions of people. David the Rothschild in Geneva, don't think you're safe in your castle there. You're not. We know where you are. We know who you are. And you have this serial child rapist Pope Malevolent the 16th. Well, he's going to be dead soon. And good riddance. Satan is waiting for you. There are a lot of these scumbags now who are on the run, and we've got to push. We've got to remove them from power. They are preventing humanity from progressing. They've held back technical progress by at least 100 years, if not more. They are trying to murder 4 billion people. They are trying to start World War III right now in Iran and in Syria. And everybody says, gee, I don't know what to do. Come on, it's just a few old men. Why don't you Americans put them in jail? And I'm letting you know now, there's a threat against Japan. There's a ship right now drilling nuclear bombs into the seabed off the shore of Chiba. It's called the Chikyu Maru. And if Japan is attacked again with a nuclear tsunami, then I've heard that there's going to be retaliation. They're going to sink a large rock formation in the Canary Islands, which will cause a 300-foot tsunami to hit the east coast of the United States, including New York, Washington, and Miami. You must prevent such tragedy. You must arrest these criminals. We know who they are. J. Rockefeller, George Bush. Don't forget the gangsters in Chicago. who control Obama. Don't forget Benjamin Netanyahu. And I have another thing I want to tell to the Jewish people. You are a God-fearing, good people ruled by Satan-worshipping gangsters, okay? The Israeli flag should have been the menorah. Instead, you have a satanic symbol, okay? That is a satanic symbol on your flag. That is not a Jewish symbol. Why isn't the menorah on the Israeli flag? I'll tell you why. Because the Rothschild family who created Israel worship Lucifer. They worship Satan. They don't worship Yahweh. They're not real Jews. Their real name is Bauer. They're using you. And you're making fools of yourself by going along with this insane plan. Hurry up and arrest those criminals who have taken over leadership of your society. This is not a joke. There's enough evidence out there for everybody to know it's true. It's all over there. Anybody who has done any research in the well-documented, thoroughly proven facts will know that a criminal gang has controlled your financial system for the past 300 years, and they are planning genocide, and they must be stopped. We will stop them. This is a declaration of war. You hear me? David Rothschild, okay? You're not safe anymore. We're tired of your murderous games. I've heard that Evelyn the Rothschild, the family leader, is now quietly hiding in his castle in England. Well, Evelyn, tell your family to stand down. Tell them enough is enough. No genocide. Your family is in danger unless you stop this madness. Time is running out. I don't like to have an angry face just as we approach Christmas. It should be a time now. We have the possibility to have the richest possible boom in the history of civilization. We have the technology to turn the deserts green. We can refill the oceans with fish. We can have world peace. And all that's blocking us is a few dozen old men. Please, everybody, arrest them. What is wrong with you people? We can have world peace. We can have all these good things. We're just being blocked by a tiny group of old men who worship Satan. That's a fact. Please, we must save the planet. Thank you. No, enough. Look, final thing to say. This is not about getting the bad guys, okay? It never has been. But they're trying to get us. And at a certain point, after so many murder attempts, after so much harassment, telling everybody that ever knew that I'd gone insane, that I was taking drugs, going around and killing people I've known, and, they've murdered more people than anyone else in history. They're responsible for World War I. They're responsible for World War II. They're responsible for the Holocaust. They killed Kennedy. They killed Martin Luther King. They killed John Lennon. They killed Michael Jackson. Okay? They've murdered leaders all over the world. They are the worst type of gangster and criminal, and they have turned the United States into a banana republic, and they're trying to turn Europe into a fascist dictatorship. And all they have as their weapon is an illusion. Fake money that's not backed by anything real. We're cutting off their money, and we're going to put them in jail. They have to surrender. We can have world peace. We can have prosperity. We can have increased longevity. We can rid ourselves of this nightmare. It's just up to us. Everybody who's listening to this, do what you can. Remember, we outnumber them 1 billion to 1 or more. Certainly, even in the areas that are most infested, you outnumber them 100 to 1. Arrest the criminals you know who are closest to you, and we can save this planet. Thank you. Kim Jong-il was murdered last Saturday in a major power struggle that is taking place here in Asia. The Rothschild family is trying to replace him with Kim Jong-un, who's a playboy educated in Switzerland, who they hope will follow their orders in exchange for beautiful woman and fancy cars and other toys. But this is now a chance for the people in the Korean Peninsula to become independent once again. They have been artificially divided in order to be put under the control of forces in Europe. There is no need for the Korean people to be divided. United, they'll be one of the strongest countries on earth. It is a chance for peace in the Korean Peninsula. And, of course, that will lead to a boom never seen before in this region of the earth. At the same time, the network of North Korean agents in Japan pretending to be Japanese is being dismantled. People are being arrested. Japan is going to be free from the control of foreign forces pretending to be Japanese. And this is a chance for the Japanese and Korean people, who are cousins, if not brothers, to have friendly and prosperous relations. Remember, the Rothschilds need war to control us. They need war to put us in debt. There's no need for humans to fight each other. We can have world peace. This is a chance. If a power struggle has begun, we must not give them the chance to once again put us under their control. Humanity can now free itself. The battle has begun. We must fight them on every front until there's world peace and there's an end to poverty and an end to environmental destruction. We can accomplish that within a matter of months once we get rid of this murderous, Satan-worshipping cabal. And it has started.
Videos so that I can, even though I'm not going back to Canada for a month as I'd like to, I will be spending a couple weeks swimming and fasting in the Japanese Alps so that I can have the energy for what's expected to be a very busy and active autumn. In any case, what I've decided to do today is, since there's so many people who are new to this secret battle for the planet Earth, I thought I'd give background on how I got involved, and from that you can see the big picture of what's happening right now. In my case, it started before the year 2000, when I used to appear on Japanese Prime TV debating the nation's top politicians. And to be honest, they weren't exactly the sharpest pencils in the box, and it surprised me. And then I realized Japan was sitting on $7 trillion of money they'd earned from exporting cars and TVs and other things to the rest of the world since the end of the war. And I thought, hey, why don't I convince them to use that money for the planet? The UN had put out a report saying that with $200 billion they could end poverty, and with $400 billion they could stop environmental destruction. So I said, oh wow! So they could do that and then have $6 trillion to spare to explore the universe. So I decided to get Japanese citizenship and run for office in order to try to get that money used for the sake of the planet. And that's when things started getting really strange. The first thing I found out from dealing with Japanese politicians, and I've met most Japanese prime ministers since the past few decades in person, they are not in charge. They are actors reading scripts. They have no power. So this is the first thing that I ran into, and I realized this was not going to help. The next thing that happened was, as a journalist, I followed the forensic trail of murders of politicians and fellow journalists, and the trail eventually led me to David Rockefeller Sr. And for years, the Japanese had been telling me that he was, our ruler, and he was the ruler of the West, and I thought that very strange. But I did the forensic reporting and found that all the world's, or 90% of the world's listed companies, Fortune 500, etc., are controlled by a series of foundations. And if you look behind the foundations, you end up with people like David Rockefeller and the Rothschilds. So I followed the forensic trail, and then the strangest thing happened. When I confronted Japanese Finance Minister Heizo Takanaka about handing over control of all of Japan's listed companies, that's when the secret societies started appearing. First, Takenaka sent a self-described assassin to me. He had offered me the job of finance minister of Japan and great wealth if I would go along with a plan to kill 90% of humanity. And I have this on tape as evidence. And he was sent by Henry Kissinger, and behind him was David Rockefeller Sr. Then I ran into Asian secret societies who, offered me protection. And this story has been out there a lot, so I won't get too much into that. But what I learned is that there was a secret war for control of the planet has been raging for millennia, but more importantly, since the end of World War II, there's a few big events that people need to understand to be able to see what's happening right now. The first was that at the end of World War II, at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, the victors of World War II, that was United States, England, France, and China, were given a 50-year mandate to control the world's financial system. The problem was they were given a lot of gold by Asian royals to back up the dollar, which was the de facto world currency. But what happened was the controllers of the G7, the people I now call the Khazarian Mafia, did not keep their promise and develop the whole world. They only developed countries they controlled. So they were cut off their gold, and an attempt was made by President Kennedy to take away their control of the Federal Reserve Board by using a gold-backed dollar in conjunction with President Sukarno of Indonesia. And, then there was the big Kennedy assassination. And then, the United States was cut off gold. So the next big jump was the 1971 or 72 Nixon shock, where they stopped trading the dollar for oil, gold and switched to oil. Now we fast forward to 1994. That's when the 50-year mandate of the Bretton Woods ran out, and basically that's what was the real reason for the collapse of the Soviet Union. And at this point, the United States decided, hey, we don't have to hand over anything. We're just going to keep control. And they planned to have a one world government controlled by a member of the Khazarian Mafia. And to do this, they were going to try to start World War III. This is what I ran into personally. So now we jump forward to 9/11. And what happened there was basically the Chinese government in Taiwan, the Kuomintang, and the Chinese royals asked for the Americans to give back the gold they lent them 6 years previously. And the International Court of Justice agreed with the Chinese, and they told the Americans they had to hand over the gold, and they're supposed to do that on September 12th, 2001, and instead we got 9/11, and then they said, all right, we're just going to invade the Middle East and grab all the world's oil, and we're going to use bioweapons, and we're going to kill everybody, and we're going to just take control. This is the neocons and their big plan. So this takes us up to around 2008, which is when the Asian secret societies cut off the dollars to the United States, stopped accepting petrodollars, and this caused the Lehman shock. And what happened then, and then at this point I was I was involved in the negotiations. And what happened was the people behind George Bush Sr., what I call the Nazi faction of the Khazarian Mafia, offered a black communist president of the United States. And the Asian secret society said, okay, and they handed over 700 tons of gold, which was then multiplied by 1,000 to issue gold-backed bonds, and that created $23 trillion that kept the whole U.S. corporate government show going until the end of the Trump presidency, at which point it ran out. And the Asians realized that Obama was not what they thought. Turns out he was a grandson of Adolf Hitler and was part of that whole cabal. So They were expecting to cut off the United States and everything to go bankrupt around 2021, and instead they pulled off what they called Operation Lockstep, which was the whole pandemic, and this forced countries around the world to pay trillions of dollars for fraudulent PCR tests, for vaccines, etc. And they were able to launder about $10 trillion, and they were hoping to kill everybody with vaccines and just stay in control. That didn't work, and that has now blown up in their faces, which takes us to roughly the present now. They have run out of big, nasty surprises, or at least I hope so. We know they may still try some kind of UFO event, and they'll keep trying all sorts of other things, but right now, most of the world has already moved away from them. If you look at the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and all the countries allied with them, you'll find that at this point, literally 90% of the world's population is no longer under the control of the Khazarian mafia. And they're just down to the 10%, that is the G7, and the fight there is raging, but what I am hoping happens this fall is that the white hats in the West, this would be the white nobility, the white hats in the Pentagon and the agencies, and all the people who realize that, the West, we were supposed to be the good guys. We're supposed to be representing democracy, freedom of the press, human rights, and all that kind of stuff. And instead, we got taken over by a cult that is trying to murder everybody and in order to enslave the survivors and act as God kings. So this is the fight we're dealing with. And the white hats have offered $100 trillion worth of gold to rebuild international institutions, to replace the post-war structure with a multi-centric world, a sort of a seven-grouping family-type structure, and a future planning agency. And like I say, there's actual physical gold to back this up. And this is what we're going to be trying to make actually happen this fall. And in order to do that, we need to remove the final controllers of the West, the people you know of as the deep state or the Khazarian mafia. And the battle is very intense this year. They're fighting for their lives. That's why I did not go back to Canada, because, just in the past week alone, for example, 200 senior Japanese military officers have been fired as a part of this fight. There's all sorts of meetings going on. But I know that every year we think something's going to change, and we always get disappointed. But the 23 trillion has run out, the 10 trillion has run out. They don't seem to have many options. So hopefully, finally, if we work our cards right, we can finally take control of the Federal Reserve Board away from these genocidal criminals. But everybody needs to play their part. And as more and more people learn the truth about the criminals who took control of the corporations and the central banks, the sooner humanity can be liberated. So that's what I'll be fighting for this autumn, and that's why I'm charging my batteries now to make it happen. Well, thanks for listening, and there'll be one more pre-recorded report next week.
If we are talking about the worst things that I have experienced, I just told you about things that made the freezer glitch. My conscience started to show itself. Let's put it this way. I was training to become a psychopath and I failed. I did not complete the training and didn't become a psychopath. My conscience came back, and the most difficult part for me was, because I had such a great status there, I was a success. I was trusted with the people playing at this level.
Mensen in deze wereld die dus op dat niveau speelden.
To put it carefully, most of these people followed not very mainstream religion. So, you have Catholics, Protestants, all sorts of religions. These people, most of them, were Luciferians. And then you can say, religion is a fairy tale, God doesn't exist, none of that is real. Well, for these people, it is truth and reality. And they served something immaterial, what they called Lucifer. And I also was in contact with those circles, only I laughed at it because to me they were just clients. So, I went to places called churches of Satan.
So now we are talking about Satanism.
Yes. So, I visited these churches, just as a visitor dropped by. And then they were doing their holy mass with naked women and liquor and stuff. And it just amused me. I didn't believe in any of this stuff, and was far from convinced if any of this was real.
It was just a spectacle to you.
Yes. In my opinion, the darkness and evil is within the people themselves. I didn't make the connection yet. So I was a guest in those circles and it amused me greatly to see all those named women and the other things. It was the good life. But then at some point, I was invited, which is why I'm telling you all this, to participate in sacrifices abroad. That was the breaking point. Children.
You were asked to do that?
Yes. And I couldn't do that.
Would you like to stop for a moment, by the way?
No. And then I started to slowly break down. I lived through quite a lot as a child myself, and this really touched me deeply. Everything changed. But that is the world I found myself in. And then I started to refuse assignments within my job. I could no longer do it, which made me a threat. I was no longer capable of functioning optimally. My performance started to shake and I had refused tasks. I had not participated. The purpose of the whole thing, eventually, in that world, is that they have everybody in their pocket. You need to be susceptible to blackmail. And blackmailing me proved to be very hard if I look back on it. They wanted to do that through those children. And that broke me.
Is that, you are not telling me something new, what they also do in politics?
If you Google this, you'll find enough worldwide witness accounts to know this isn't a Walt Disney fairy tale. Unfortunately, the truth is that worldwide they have been doing this for thousands of years. I once studied theology, and even in the Bible you find references to these practices with Israelites. The reason the first 10 tribes were banished to Babylonia was because of these rituals with children, including the sacrificing of children. So this is pertinent. All this made me believe, because I realized there was more to life than meets the eye. There is a whole invisible world. It is real.
Ronald, you have a very strong background in the financial sector, asset management, deposit trading. As far as I understood, can you tell us something about your experiences? For how long did you work there?
Well, my experiences are more complicated than what you mentioned just now. Actually, I have been an entrepreneur my entire life. Independence being the key component to me. I have once tried being an employee, but that didn't work out. Being an entrepreneur, I have seen many sectors, amongst which I have experienced the financial world. All my other companies as an entrepreneur, like my own fashion line for ladies, car dealership and also import-export, had me involved to such an extent with building up my own fortune. It inherently guided me into the world of finance. Working in import-export, you encounter different currencies and you have to go to the exchange to trade through brokers. And one of the brokers said at some point, "Ronald, I've been looking at your life for a long time and you are always busy. You earn money, we know, but what is your goal?" And I replied, "The only goal I have as an entrepreneur is to earn as much money as I possibly can. Because, the more money I have, the quicker I can retire, be free and of course have status. Basically everything you want in this society, or at least, that's what I thought back then." So the broker said, "In that case, stop what you are doing now, stop with all those companies and just start dealing money, go into the financial world." And that is the beginning of that situation that is connected to your original question. The broker had a place in the exchange market and he dealt in currencies, deposits, so trading in assets to make money out of differences in interest rates, and that involved the aforementioned asset management. Those three aspects together formed the interested package I said yes to. He said, "All right, you can take my place here, I'll train you, introduce you into the network, but in exchange I want 10% of your annual earnings." So he basically sold me his spot in the financial world and asked a 10% commission, which I paid him. I said, "Yes, fine with me." Then he replied, "There is one thing you need to know. If you can't put your conscience in the proverbial freezer, and I don't mean on -18 degrees, but on -100 degrees, then don't get involved in this." That was the message. You want a lot of money, you can obtain that, I can help you, but it comes at a great cost. Because you cannot do this with a clear conscience. Well, I laughed at that. I was young and naive. From my youth, from the way I came into life, my far from ideal youth led me to develop a certain view of the world and humanity.
What do you mean by that? No warm, loving family?
My mother always did the best she could to make us feel loved. But she was hampered by that due to the behavior of my father, who caused us to feel more like we lived in a war zone with each other. That isn't an exemplary situation to grow up in. And as a child growing up like that, led me to believe that the world and humanity are far from great.
So putting your conscience in the freezer was fitting in as a starting point?
I was partially already used to doing that out of self-preservation. So to put my conscience in the freezer was not an impossible task to me.
So it became a survival mechanism to you?
Yes, yes. And my view of humanity and the world around me wasn't exactly positive either. I only thought of myself, that the way I grew up to be out of self-preservation, and I got into that deal. Which meant that slowly I built up a customer base. And as I improved my skills within the network, I got deeper into the financial world. And then it turns out the world is really small, and you keep noticing that. Even when I was still working in import-export, dealing in grain and such, you notice it is just a small circle. And if we talk about the hardcore circle in the financial world, I don't mean Miss Jean at the bank, but the big global flows of money which you use for trading.
Zeg maar de grote geldstromen die op aarde rondgaan, waar je mee gaat handelen.
You are talking about worldwide cash flows, so not the Netherlands in particular where you started working?
The Netherlands do play a distinct part in this story, but the world does not revolve around it.
Maar Nederland is niet het centrum van de aarde. Nederland is een
The
onderdeel
Netherlands are a part of a large global financial system, in which you work through exchange mark if you want to do official transactions.
Als je officiële transacties wil doen, kan je dat via beurs doen. En heel veel banken
And many banks, who do the currency
de
exchange,
geldwisselaars zijn,
get certain assignments from clients, which they can't get away with easily.
moeilijk mee weg kunnen. En dan is het handig
Then the need arises for people like me, who were the straw men where big money flows are involved.
Je kan ook zeggen de loopjongen van het grote geld.
We used certain financial constructions, international legislation, to move money in such a way making everything okay.
Het geld zo gaan bewegen dat het allemaal oké is. Dus dat
So all supervisors, regulatory bodies that are in place worldwide, because they are. That no one wakes up seeing what is going on, like a year or two ago, with the scandal around Panama.
Een hoop ophef hadden over Panama.
The Panama Papers.
Yes.
Tax evasion.
I think, well, it was about avoiding taxes. Tax evasion is when you break all the rules. This had to do with avoiding.
Het ging hier om ontwijken.
But when you see what happened there, I'm like, guys, that is old news. And who are you bring with that, because it is peanuts and hardly relevant. However, for the common people, that is great news, but it is not anything big, but it does show there is something very wrong in this world. For example, there are people in the Netherlands, with certain positions, who have bank accounts in Panama, with legislation that allows them not to pay taxes in the Netherlands, which is completely legal. Constructions like that were part of my job. When we had to change currency, we had changes, the first boycotts in Iraq in the early 90s.
Dat was in het begin van de jaren 90.
When there was a boycott in Iraq because of the war that started there. And we were confronted with what we called Iraqi dollar. Iraqi dollars, which were actually American dollars. The American dollar has a direct relation to the oil prices, which made it a world trading currency backed up by oil. As long as that connection is in place, the dollar has a value. Officially, the Iraqi people weren't allowed to sell their oil due to the boycott. In theory, that is, because never before there was such a big business in oil. With discounts in this case, because officially it wasn't allowed, so with discounts it still crossed the borders. These dollars, because the energy was always paid in the dollars, so the Iraqi dollars had to go somewhere. You couldn't just take them to the desk at the bank because of all the regulations and checks did provide a certain protection. Because money laundering and criminality wasn't anything new back then. Now we call it terrorism. But that was then also the case. So, then you need people to take the heat. As straw men, you got invited to a bank, for example, in Germany's, with basements full of trucks filled with money. And then you think, sure. Trucks, transports, a busy company. Come with me, then they show you they are all filled to maximum capacity with dollars. And they tell you we need to get rid of all this cash. So change them pounds, German marks, this, that, in such way, and it needs to go there and there.
Are we now talking about money laundering?
Well, processing cash. Processing cash in such a way that we can legally reintroduce it into the money circuit.
So that was your task?
That was an assignment my colleagues and I got. You are never alone on an assignment, because you cannot do this on your own. It is not possible. We all know Scrooge McDuck scooping money with his shovel. Well, we literally had to do that over there. It was impossible to process all at once. So, then you need to find a way. Cash used to be the predominant way of paying, where nowadays most is digital. But you tried to find a way to process the cash. How do you reintroduce the cash into the circuit so Iraq can deal in its oil without being hampered? Because they are the ones that own the money. Iraq doesn't want. Look, you mentioned money laundering, but what it was about the boycott, Iraq had to stick to the rules, and buy, everything you want to know about the world. You can know by following the money. That is the bottom line. Everyone can say blah, 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 but make sure you follow the money, then you'll find the truth. Same thing goes for that situation. So the only thing Iraq and their buying partners wanted was to remain free of any accusations. Because the partners who bought it were the ones placing the boycott in the first place, but they are actually all friends on the same side. Everybody thinks there are opposites like good and bad guys in the world. But on the higher levels, it is just a game and they are all working together. However, they do have to stick to the rules and regulations they themselves have created to keep the rest of society suppressed and make sure that it will not be too crowded at the top. So you have to play by your own rules. So what is going on there is to make sure that nobody can trace you, apart from the elite themselves. Nobody in lower ranks can find out what really happened.
Compartmentalized, that's how we call it.
Yes.
Everyone knows only his own little piece. Only the elite knows what is happening.
Yes, but because we were doing the dirty work, we had to know a lot. Because we couldn't afford to make any mistakes.
How high in the pyramid did you get? Were you close to the top of the pyramid?
Well, we were communicating with them. My ego would have loved it when I got to this position of belonging to the top itself. Nowadays we still talk about 8,000 to 8,500 people in the world who run the entire world. It would have been amazing to get into such a position back then.
All right, but if we say the top knows 100%, can you estimate how much you knew and understood of what happened?
In my work, I had to know 100% of what was going on. There was no other way, because of the interests of the people involved were huge, especially for the top. If I wouldn't know all the details, I would end up making mistakes. Which would cause a spin-off, because those mistakes would be detected. Then the people that don't know anything about it would interfere. We are talking about having nerves of steel to function at this level.
So did you have nerves of steel?
Yes, it worked just fine.
The freezer worked very well for you.
Yes, I played at the highest level for about 5 years. And then it was totally over, out and done with. That was a very intense moment for me.
That happened suddenly?
Well, no, the thing is, I gave a small example of what was involved. So, in this case, currency exchange, dollar to something else, deposited in a safe manner, and managing assets well, so it could grow to rate of return, leading to reinvestments with the money. The level I played at in those 5 years. And that didn't happen overnight, you need to earn your place. I am skilled at connecting the dots, information in order to achieve a full picture of all the things involved.
op een bepaalde manier met elkaar te combineren.
That need to be taken into account within the playing field, which is a very detailed process. You stand out when you are gifted in this. This is the reason I was trusted with the full 100% of the information where it concerned my jobs. So, I didn't know about everything they knew, but everything that I needed to know regarding the case I was working with colleagues. I was often put in the leading role, because I kept a good overview of the situation.
You're good at making quick switches.
Yes, and I was good at innovative thinking to solve the problem. I had fun creating solutions in such a way to always stay ahead and outsmart them. Staying within the rules of the game but playing around with them to make everything match up. I love that game. However, on the other hand, you had a great amount of responsibility and you learned more and more about the real world, since through the financial world you learn all of the actual truth.
So you say all, in what regard?
Well, your clients give you glimpses of how the world really works. In hindsight, I still didn't know everything. But I did know a lot, because my clients were banks who didn't want blood on their hands. But within those banks there always is a number of people who know damn well what is going on. So, like 1% within a bank knows the truth of the matter regarding the happenings within the world. Which is not surprising, considering they are involved in the flows of money. Those are your clients. You also have governments to deal with, multinationals. You have to deal with secret services, and what they now call terrorist organizations. You get all of the groups that are involved with the big money as clients. Then you start seeing the connections, so, they might be compartmentalized as you just mentioned, regarding knowledge. But because I am in the middle, I see how they relate to another. You see the money coming from this place, then going to that place, etc. You keep gaining information and thereby an overview of what is really going on.
So do you have to serve and keep all of those groups happy, including terrorist organizations? You were trying to keep everybody happy?
Yes.
My God.
That was my job.
Keeping all the balls in the air.
Yes, indeed. So one of the things that I found out, I did not know that before, but now I do, is about secret services. You think they are there to serve and protect a people, country, etc., but they actually turn out to be the criminal organizations, to be more precise. The system is heavily so. We are talking about financing wars, creating wars, so basically creating a lot of misery in this world. So, lots of conflict. And then I think to myself, if only people knew what the world is really like. Secret services will stop at nothing. Nothing. But they also have their flows of money, because if they are trading in drugs or weapons or, for that matter, people, all that money has to go somewhere. Everything has to be financed.
You say if, but you could confirm they are doing this?
All of them? All of them? So the entire world as we think we know it, is just an illusion we believe in. Which is something you find out in this line of work and where it all went wrong for me, to put it that way.
Right. You mean, finally that is.
In hindsight, yes, it was for the best, but my freezer started to malfunction. There were things happening. For example, I went to a different trade market and one of my colleagues there said, "Ronald, you remember that case with the Italian lira? I sometimes mention that during talks as well. Do you remember those deals, in which we did massive dumping of the lira, which reduced the value of the currency? Which caused a company in Italy to be hit in such a way, they went bankrupt. And then you hear at the exchange, you remember that successful deal with the lira? Yes. And then they say, did you know that the owner committed suicide and left a family behind? Things like that. And back then we laughed at it. altogether, all of us. We looked down on people, mocked them. It was just a product, waste. Everything was worthless trash. Nature, the planet, everything could burn and break.
Just useless parasites.
Just as long as we met our goals, as long as we were growing, many of my colleagues ended up drinking or using drugs. Not me. Maybe I should have.
Or not.
No, in hindsight, it was for the best and I'm happy to still be alive. However, all those horrible things started to eat at me.
Can you give an example? Because I can sense a lot of terrible things happen to you.
Yes. It is difficult for me to talk about.
I can feel that, but only whatever you wish to share is all right.
Yes. I only talk about things I want to tell. But it does evoke lots of emotions, and with my conscience not being in the freezer, it touches me deeply.
Yes, I feel the same way. All right. Can you tell me the worst thing that has happened that caused the tipping point in your situation?
Well, that was the beginning of the end. You get so deep into these circles. And you sign a lifetime contract, not with blood or anything, to never disclose names of companies, organizations or people. I think that is why I am still alive. You have to stick to it. If we are talking about the worst things that I have experienced, I just told you about things that made the freezer glitch. My conscience started to show itself. Let's put it this way. I was training to become a psychopath and I failed. I did not complete the training and didn't become a psychopath. My conscience came back, and the most difficult part for me was, because I had such a great status there, I was a success. I was trusted with the people playing at this level.
Mensen in deze wereld die dus op dat niveau speelden.
To put it carefully, most of these people followed a not very mainstream religion. So, you have Catholics, Protestants, all sorts of religions. These people, most of them, were Luciferians. And then you can say, religion is a fairy tale. God doesn't exist. None of that is real. Well, for these people, it is truth and reality. And they served something immaterial, what they called Lucifer. And I also was in contact with those circles, only I laughed at it because to me they were just clients. So, I went to places called churches of Satan.
So now we are talking about Satanism.
Yes. So, I visited these churches, just as a visitor, dropped by. And then they were doing their holy mass with naked women and liquor and stuff. And it just amused me. I didn't believe in any of this stuff, and was far from convinced if any of this was real.
It was just a spectacle to you.
Yes. In my opinion, the darkness and evil is within the people themselves. I didn't make the connection yet. So I was a guest in those circles, and it amused me greatly to see all those named women and the other things. It was the good life. But then at some point, I was invited, which is why I'm telling you all this, to participate in sacrifices abroad. That was the breaking point. Children.
You were asked to do that?
Yes. And I couldn't do that.
Would you like to stop for a moment, by the way?
No. And then I started to slowly break down. I lived through quite a lot as a child myself, and this really touched me deeply. Everything changed. But that is the world I found myself in. And then I started to refuse assignments within my job. I could no longer do it, which made me a threat. I was no longer capable of functioning optimally. My performance started to shake and I had refused tasks. I had not participated. The purpose of the whole thing, eventually, in that world, is that they have everybody in their pocket. You need to be susceptible to blackmail. And blackmailing me proved to be very hard if I look back on it. They wanted to do that through those children. And that broke me.
Is that, you are not telling me something new, what they also do in politics?
If you Google this, you'll find enough worldwide witness accounts to know this isn't a Walt Disney fairy tale. Unfortunately, the truth is that worldwide they have been doing this for thousands of years. I once studied theology, and even in the Bible you find references to these practices with Israelites. The reason the first 10 tribes were banished to Babylonia was because of these rituals with children, including the sacrificing of children. So this is pertinent. All this made me believe, because I realized there was more to life than meets the eye. There is a whole invisible world. It is real. You really do talk about a dark force and a manifestation of light. So, I resorted to studying theology to make sense of it all.
And psychology as well, if I remember correctly?
Yes, but that I did in my first life, because through commercial psychology, mass psychology, I was able to manipulate situations for my own benefit.
That is scary, because if you dig into that you find Tavistock Institute and mind control, MK Ultra, Monarch and the like.
Yes, that is correct, but that was all part of the job. Through training at the job, I got into that more deeply, because when you are making deals, you also need to manipulate the media. You have to manipulate lots of things because nothing can be seen as it is. Everything has to appear to be something different. You see the people as a flock of sheep. You put a couple of border collies and drive them in a direction. And to be honest with you, I still see that happening around me. People are still, through the systems and methods that we ourselves used to use, being treated in that same way, and it still works. People still don't understand how it really works and are still on the level of as long as I have my beer and whatever, completely self-absorbed, also a survival mechanism. I mean, it is the program after all. But you still see how stupidly easy it is to put people in a certain direction, when you are the one pulling the strings, that is.
Mass psychology.
Yes, and later, much later, in all those studies and discoveries, I found a document which they are claiming is bullshit, of course, the Protocols of Zion. And nowadays I recommend everyone to read the whole of that incredibly boring document. Just work through it, read it though.
We are also talking about Zionism.
Yes, of course. If you read the Protocols of Zion and really study them and understand, then it is like reading the newspaper of the daily life. How from their position of ultimate power, and ultimate it has literally become. But that is only because the people don't stand up for themselves. They don't realize what reality is.
And we have all been programmed. If you dare to say you are against Zionism, then you are branded an anti-Semite.
The negative, you can say evil, the Luciferians, the Satanists, whatever you wish to call it, it is a real entity. I have found that what is written in the Bible, and not just the Bible, you can find it in so many books. There really has been a moment of separation from the manifestation of light, in which a group went their own way and are carrying an intense hatred, anger. The people who do not underestimate the severity of this are but few. Because this is an all-annihilating force that hates our guts. It hates creation. It hates life. And it will do anything to destroy us completely. And the way to do that is to divide humanity. Divide and conquer is their truth. Humanity is a manifestation of light. That is the true creation. As long as you divide them based on political parties, skin color, you name it, then you, from a Luciferian point of view, that is, suppress the full capacities of your enemy, their full power. They can't stand up for themselves. Because if that would happen, the Luciferians would lose. Then this monster, the greedy monster, would disappear. I tell people about this old American general who puts an entire room of people in the dark. The eyes adapt to the darkness, but you can't see a thing. The general doesn't say a word and suddenly he flicks on a lighter, one little light. And due to the prolonged darkness, you experience a manifestation of light from a single point and everyone can slightly see each other again. And then he says, that is the power of our light.
Beautiful.
Unite. Unite. Come together. And this entire shit story ceases to exist. That's how fast it could happen. But that is easy for me to say now. But then I was in a period of my life in which I was crumbling down.
Could you tell us something specific about that? How did that happen? Because you were invited.
I started to refuse assignments. My conscience came back after the request involving the children and I started to refuse more and more. I had a conscience and I couldn't function anymore.
But you did still show up at work after that?
I didn't really have a choice. I had my own business with several offices and employees. Everything was still rolling.
It must have been hard.
Yes, it got very hard, all the tensions. So, on the one hand you are playing with money on a high level, in which you can't afford to make mistakes. Otherwise everything falls down at once. Your entire business is ruined, everybody involved, including yourself. Then you are really screwed. So that brings a lot of stress, factoring in the resurfacing of a conscience. I was warned off when I got into this. Don't do it if you can't put your conscience at minus 100 degrees in the freezer.
And you probably realized that then?
Yes, I heard myself laugh at it back then, but it wasn't a joke at all. I totally did not understand where I really got into.
And your proverbial freezer was switched off?
Broken. I couldn't do it anymore. So, I tried to work through it, keep up appearances. I didn't know how to get out of this. I was trapped as well. Everybody was trapped. This all led me to crash completely eventually. My body just simply stopped. The first thing I saw was my mother crying at the intensive care.
You ended up at the IC?
Yeah, I really shut down.
You had literally crashed?
Yes. Yes. At that time I didn't believe in anything, not I can still recall how I saw. From that corner, I was looking down upon myself. I saw how they were working on me.
You had a near-death experience.
Well, you could call it that. I have seen I am not my body. I'm in my body. But I am not just my body. I have seen them working on me. And later on, I've been reluctant to talk about it for a long time. I really talked about it much later. But when I did, I had researched so many things already and started to believe. I was starting to better understand the spiritual and the material. At that point, this intense experience got its own place. The realization that I'm not my body. It's just a vessel. So, I lived through all of that, but I also needed a long time to recover.
nodig gehad om te herstellen.
Yes, of course.
Ja, ik was
Yes, I was a train wreck. Complete wreck. I was completely burned out. I had crashed and the body needed a year to recover.
Om te herstellen. Want
Because I don't really want to get into it now, but in those circles, I got tortured physically during my exit time. This was in order to make sure I would never break the contract of secrecy. So, I was taken for a certain amount of time. I was treated. All those factors together just increased the stress I was experiencing. Literally running full speed towards my own end.
Do you mean abductions, as well call it, or programming?
No, they exposed me to certain types of torture. That makes sure you'll never damage anyone in that world. I didn't realize that back then, so this is all from hindsight. It did all happen that way. So the end of my first life was so extreme that I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't handle it anymore, in no way. However, my mind power was so strong that it only happened within to my own body. That was, well, I didn't know what to do anymore. There were no options left for me. So that is why sometimes I think, of course that is not true, but I wish, like so many colleagues, I had taken the drugs and alcohol route. At least my end would have been more gentle, because most of them are just dead by now. Even though I know there are more strawmen walking around, there are little still alive whom I knew back then. Most of them are already gone. Well, I was dead too, but I'm still here.
So, you still have something left to do.
Yes, I suppose you could say that. But that is, I can't say in short, since I don't know how long we have been talking, the world that I found myself in. If you have any specific questions, then I can answer them, but I had hoped to be more concise, but I just don't know how.
Well, you have my gratitude for all you have shared.
To me, it is still a very big deal.
This is a declaration of war. You hear me? David Rothschild, okay? You're not safe anymore. We're tired of your murderous games. I've heard that Evelyn the Rothschild, the family leader, is now quietly hiding in his castle in England. Well, Evelyn, tell your family to stand down. Tell them enough is enough. No genocide. Your family is in danger unless you stop this madness. Time is running out. I don't like to have an angry face just as we approach Christmas. It should be a time now. We have the possibility to have the richest possible boom in the history of civilization. We have the technology to turn the deserts green. We can refill the oceans with fish. We can have world peace. And all that's blocking us is a few dozen old men. Please, everybody, arrest them. What is wrong with you people? We can have world peace. We can have all these good things. We're just being blocked by a tiny group of old men who worship Satan. That's a fact. Please, we must save the planet. Thank you. No, enough.
For a little bit, yeah. Lock in my vibe, I'll get what you ain't for. Whole focus for life, got the circle in the pants. No boys on the drunk shit, waking up drunk, I get mad. I've been lost for a little bit, yeah. Lock in my vibe, I'll get what you ain't.
All ancient civilizations depicted a flat Earth under a dome.
Used to work at Area 51.
Well, you know, we want to be accurate.
Okay.
Area S4. Within the Area 51 compound, you can call that a subset of Area 51.
Before that, you were working...
Before that, I had worked at Los Alamos
right.
National Labs in New Mexico.
Polygrapher Terry Tavernetti runs a corporate security operation and is a former Los Angeles police officer. He put Lazard through 4 tests and concluded there was no attempt to deceive.
And I left there thinking that I feel we do have some credibility to what the subject had to say. And that's when I went to some of my colleagues.
Tavernetti sent the test results to a 3rd polygrapher who agreed the results appeared truthful.
Religion. You saw some other reports that you...
Yeah, religious documents, yeah. Well,
pretty hard to swallow?
Very hard to swallow.
Saying basically that... basically that we're a product of genetic engineering from someone...
Yeah. Yeah, how can you just swallow that whole?
Well, how can you swallow any of that stuff?
Well, it's easy to swallow things you can put your hands on and touch and work with. That's no problem. But when you get into a lot of spiritual stuff and religion, and you know, you were brought here, and we were made by progressive corrections and evolution and that sort of thing, and where it shoots down a lot of the established religions, Catholicism, and everything. It said, you know, essentially it's a tough thing to accept, and you know why, without hardcore proof, why even bring it up?
I guess the question more should deal with that you actually read a report that said this stuff.
Well, yeah, the only hardcore thing is that there is a extremely classified document dealing with religion, and it's about that thick. Period. But why would there be any classified material dealing with religion? Oh, come on, that's so weird. That's a lot.
I'm not asking you to say what you believe to be a fact. I'm asking you to say what you read in a report that that is distributed at what may be the most top secret facility in the world. Okay. All right.
All right, I'll say it. It's so far out.
All right, your objection has been noted.
Okay.
What does it say?
That we're containers. That's how supposedly the aliens look at us. That we are nothing but containers.
Containers of?
Containers. Maybe containers of souls. You can come up with whatever theory you want, but we're containers. And that's how we're mentioned in the documents. That religion was specifically created so we have some rules and regulations for the sole purpose of not damaging the containers.
The souls? Meaning?
Well, the souls or the bodies, whatever. Right? That's
meaning like we're containers for souls that they're going to use at some other point.
Right.
It's real. Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to PsychSec. Can I answer any questions? What is it all about? Well, we're a company that produces 100% organic human sleeves. You're probably wondering what's a human sleeve. Well, if you gather around, I can let you know what we do here in full details. So here at PsychSec, we've been able to achieve true immortality by taking your human consciousness and storing it on a device called a cortical stack. implanted in the base of your neck, and it collects and stores everything that makes you you. Every memory, every emotion, every sensation, everything you've ever experienced gets stored on this little device. You can see it here on the screen that's about to come up. You guys just follow me. All the information is stored on this device and can be digitally transferred from one sleeve that you currently occupy into the sleeve of your choosing.
Sleeves are basically human bodies we grow in our labs. They're organically real. Bones, tissue, organs, everything. These are the best bodies you'll ever have, period. Nothing can hurt these bodies, but they are human. So if something were to happen to them, you can always change them out for a new one. That's why it says immortality becomes non-existent. Because you can be 50 in one body and change to the next body. You're as young as you feel. If you come this way, David's going to show you some 2018 models that you can choose from.
Well, you can choose which sleeve you desire. Now you can either have the sleeve that you have right now, or we have a selection of wonderful sleeves that we have made through Psychosec, fully genuine and organic produced. Now if you'd like to be taller, shorter, skinnier, if you'd like to have better vision, maybe strengthen your body, you have the choice to choose a man or a woman's sleeve. Now if your sleeve becomes damaged or too old for your liking, simply remove from the cortical stack your DHF, your consciousness, to another, newer sleeve.
Patriots. Today I have the highlights from Gene Decode's interview on the Nicholas Veneman Show. He discusses the topic of clones, and he goes into the types of clones, a little bit of history, how clones are made, and I've also included some examples for you as he talks. At the end of the video, we have Donald Marshall discussing the infamous vril lizard type of clone. So I hope you enjoy it, and with that said, here we go.
Well, I go depending on the person, always when I red pill. So if I'm talking to them and, I get into that subject one way or another, I see where they're at. So if they're thinking you can't clone at all, it's never been done, I go to the history of cloning. So bacteria was cloned, way back in, shortly after they found out about, DNA. They actually started cloning bacteria. And then, of course, there's Dolly the sheep that was cloned. And, people can look at it very easily and see that they cloned Dolly. If you give me a screen share, I can actually pull that up really quick and just show a little thing on that. So here, just DuckDuckGo. Dolly, cloning Dolly sheep. So Dolly the sheep, since 1996, when Dolly was born, the other sheep, they clone from adult cells. They've also done that with cats, rabbits, horses, dogs, pigs, goats, cattle, etc. Mouse, 2004, was cloned using a nucleus of the cell. And then you can go read the article there. Just click on that. There's the article about cloning Dolly the sheep. And then furthermore, you can go look into other cloning that they've done through here. And so you can also go to clone and cloning, the history of cloning. All I did is put history of cloning in. 1958 cloning began. 1964, cloning of animal cells. They've already gotten down to where they're cloning it here in Japan from cells found in cow's milk. And so, obviously this has been coming a long time. It's not something brand spanking new. And then most people are familiar with the movie The Boys from Brazil. Actually, a lot of movies are just the deep state revealing it so that if the information comes out, they can just say, that's a movie, that's not real. But that was real. The clone 90, I think it was 94, 96, somewhere in there, one of those two. You can read this article, it's in here. Copies of Hitler and put them in families, 94. So, into situations and then killed, the certain people that Hitler lost in his life, primary people, so that they would have the same environment growing up. And so this is, going into The Boys from Brazil in that movie. The actors, here's the cast, and that going into that cloning situation. So, you can look up how Dolly and all that was cloned, and all of that information is very, very easy to find. And then another thing I'll go into, if they're seeming to be pretty wide open about it, is I'll talk about the different types of clones. So a lot of people are familiar with the situation and where one of our presidents went to China and he threw up on the premier of China because he was a type of clone that's known as a robotoid that they make at Bethesda in Maryland, where they put somebody in a booth that hits them with a low-level particle beam that it just passes through, and it analyzes their genetics, and it downloads all of their memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, everything. And then it puts that on a hard drive or a floppy, and then they take the person out, and the particle beam is upped in power, and it literally, almost like Star Trek, beaming, but you're not beaming anybody. You're literally from energy creating a matter copy. And those copies, of course, don't have an internal power supply. So they, like in the movie Tron, they start to de-res over time. And so they have to go back to Camp David on a regular basis to get recharged. And so in the situation where that president was visiting and he threw up, it was because during his speech, and that's why you see now presidents have two items on each side of them. It's to keep this from happening, to reflect those beams, that they hit him with a sonic beam that was at his resonant frequency, which would have killed him. But because he was a robotoid type clone, he was starting to de-res. His frequency was dropped down, so it made him very ill. So later he threw up, and then at the meal, he slid under the table. I'm pretty sure it was China. Might have been Japan. I may be slightly off and stole a little bit out of it because of the shedding. I'm pretty sure it was China. And then go into the next type of clone that Donald Marshall goes into, which is Vril. And Vril were found when they were making the domes, and especially the maglevs, and going through all the old tunnels and mine shafts. They use a lot of mining areas and a lot of the old mines and old tunnels and things. They found this little tiny, about 2 to 3 foot type of lizard kind of creature, reptile. And on top of its head, it had a proboscis. And one of the people that was involved, one of them got on his face and injected down his optic nerve some materials. And those materials went into the person's brain, and he died. But he came back to life, a little over a week later, but he was different. And what had happened is the Vril, kind of like the old movie Pod People, except in this case, it literally reanimated him and took over his personality, his memories and everything. But and this is the case with Biden, Smokey Joe, in which for about 2 or 3 years, it has full access to the memories, but it's only running on the first 4 energy centers, it's not running on the heart center, though. It's running on the root center, the dantian, the solar plexus center, and the will. So it's able to control the person for 2 to 3 years, and then it starts losing control, and it starts losing access to the memory. And in that point, the person looks in exactly like someone getting dementia and Alzheimer's, where they start forgetting where they're at, forgetting how to say, words, how to remember things, even who's there. Like with Smokey Joe, when he's running, he introduced his daughter as his wife, and I'm running for Congress, all kinds of crazy stuff we all remember. And it gets worse and worse and worse until eventually the person dies from it, just like with Alzheimer's dementia situation. Same situation, but they forget how to even the bodily functions, and the vril loses control. Then the next type is, of course, the type like Dolly the sheep, where they use cellular tissue. And then now the last type is where they can literally get any cellular tissue, erase the DNA, and pass through somebody else. And this is David Wilcock went into this, where they Louis T. Montagnier actually did an experiment where he passed laser light through a frog cell into a salamander, I believe it was. And when the egg into the egg of a salamander, and when the egg came out, it was a frog. And so they can actually rewrite the DNA by passing it from one cell to another. And they'll actually make it easier by erasing the nuclear information in the cellular, nucleus. And that's why you saw in that Dolly the sheep, they were going into the nucleus, because they were looking at doing this where they could just pass a frequency through somebody into some stem cells that have had the genetic code erased and make a copy of the person. And the problem they have with the clones is that, and this is why they have research in several of the DUMBs that they used to have in California and out in also in Nevada, in the area, Dugway Proving Ground areas, and those. They're researching chromosomes, certain chromosomes like 51, 52, 26, 27, 21, etc., because the clones aren't absolutely identical. Like if a person has non-attached earlobes, they would wind up having attached earlobes, or the eyes might be a little off. Certain, memories might be missing. And so they're trying to get it, absolutely identical, but they have not gotten to that point, like we saw with Jeffrey Epstein, where the person later that they showed that was on the dead person wasn't identical to the pictures of him when he was alive, because that wasn't really him that was killed. It was a clone that was killed. And so it's a close enough thing that the average person not knowing this stuff, not looking for it, will catch it. But it's not close enough for those of us who know.
Right. We understand that cloning and vrils are slightly different, because they can take your blood and they can clone you in the cloning centers. And the people that are managing the cloning centers, from the information that I found, were people that have been body snatched by the lizards, if you like, and they have moved their own consciousness into the human body, but killing the human consciousness in that human body. And that's why we see, pedophiles and human trafficking, and people think, well, how can humans do this? Well, it's because their consciousness is not human. It's they're parasites, they're lizards that have moved their consciousness into these beings, and they have no empathy, and they're just very, very good at faking empathy. What are your thoughts on that?
Exactly. It's two reasons. In the Vril situation, like I said, the heart center is skipped. The energy center, the little computer ball of fiber optics that conduct ultraviolet light, the acupuncture meridians, come together in balls that are little like servers in our body. The Hindus and the ancient Indians could observe them, and they spin. So they call them chakras, which is a term in Hindu, I believe, that means spinning wheel. And so these spinning wheels, they could see the light and the energy spinning in them in different colors and frequencies. There's different variations depending on the location. Well, the Vril doesn't activate the heart because it doesn't want empathy. It wants to control the person and not have any of their memories, their cellular memories, the unconscious, interfere so that it could, it can make the being, that it's now controlling do anything it wants. Additionally, when a person dies, of course, the soul leaves. So now in the Vril and all the other situations too, a clone doesn't have a soul. From my information, when they do that, a soul doesn't come in there. So that is our moral center. Is our soul is what gives us the feeling of what's right and wrong, and being kind and considerate, and have some empathy and respect for others. Without that, you're a sociopath or a psychopath. More often a psychopath. And so that's another thing that you can tell, because with psychopaths in Japanese, the term is sympaku ai, where if you look at a person's eye, like I look at your eyes right now, and I can only see the whites of your eyes on the right and the left side of your iris. And so I don't see white on the bottom. I don't see three whites. And sympaku ai, the three whites is a sociopath. Four whites, like you see with Shifty Chef, that's a psychopath. And so if you look at the, some of the worst killers, we've known, and the mass murders and those things, you'll see four whites, where you see white all, and their eyes don't have to be that wide open. And it literally over time, it looks like their eyes are starting to bug out of their head, because they're getting, the no empathy. And the way it is, it actually causes the structure of the eye to change to where you see four whites. You see white all around the eye, the color of the eye, the iris.
Wow. Well, very interesting. And why are these lizards, you mentioned 2 to 3 foot lizards. Where do they come from, and how did they get here?
From my understanding, they're actually indigenous, and they live beneath the earth in tunnels and little caves and caverns and that. And they discovered them with Project Mark Rand, which is the big project to make all the dumbs and all this. Miners and things, of course, knew about them a long time ago, and were careful, because there has been situations, cave-ins, etc., like mining, where they get trapped and somebody gets knocked out, and a real lizard comes over the person, while they're unconscious. And, the person dies, and they haul the body out, and then later the person reanimates. And of course, somebody's been dead, and then they reanimate, back then they usually would burn the person, because they realized that they've been possessed. So now, the cabal uses that so that they have a copy that will have no empathy, no compassion, and be able to serve them in how they want.
Let's talk about cloning and how they clone a person or a celebrity, because it happens a lot in celebrities, and they're controlled. Well, that's why we look at them and they look really not there. They torture them if they don't comply. And then they kill them in the clone body, and then they move their consciousness into another clone body, and they repeat the same situation. So it's endless murder, endless torture for that same person, and endless bodies. What are your thoughts about that? If you could explain that to us, please, Gene.
Well, depends on the person. If they're, knowing they're going to become extremely famous, they keep the original in a cage in a dump. Because if you keep copying a copy, you get genetic fading. Just like in an old VCR tape or a cassette tape, and you would make a copy, and then your friend would make a copy from the copy he got from you, and then on and on and on. Pretty soon you don't have video. 8 copies down, you don't even have audio anymore. Same thing happens with genetic copying. It's called genetic drift, where you get drift and you get fading to where it's no longer viable. And so if they know they're going to need to make many, many, many copies, they will keep the original in a cage, and the original is quantumly entangled to the clone. So it is aware and experiencing everything that the clone is getting and having. And so there's Bernie Mac and a bunch of the African-American gentlemen, where I don't have, able to pull it up right now because I didn't know we were going to talk about this, but they were riding in a limo and talking about this and saying, well, if I'm the clone, I'm going to enjoy my wife and this and that. And I consider all of what I have mine. And, but the original is, that may have been originally the originals. And so these stars, when they sign on the line, They sign away their soul. They get cloned also. They don't even know that was part of the deal. But they get taken down to these cloning centers and they live out their life in a cage while the clones are being them. So, this is always the case with the high level people within the media and the high level, with very few exceptions. There are a few minor exceptions of alliance personnel now and some people a long time ago that got around this, and then politicians as well that are run by the cabal, and then people who get really, really famous. It's wise to have security and people around you if you go out in public. One of the reasons I'm not allowed to go out in public much, in trying to keep who I am, because, I was going to go to some of these events where Flynn and all these people are talking, and they told me no way ever, because to grab somebody, put in a syringe, put them out, chloroform them, whatever, and have, you can already get at a previous meeting, get their DNA, have a clone ready to go. They anesthetize the person, take the original away, and literally in seconds, person goes in the bathroom, somebody else comes out. Literally in seconds, they're switched out. And most people don't realize it. And so you'll notice, because they don't have a soul, the person starts to change their behavior. They start to get less empathic, empathy. They have less empathy, and they get less scruples. They're willing to undermine you, to turn on you, they don't agree with you like they used to on major topics. I don't agree with things they were fine with you before. And that's, as that time goes on, it'll get worse and worse and worse. And, you'll lose best friends and you'll lose people, long-term associations, because you found out it's not the same person anymore. And a lot of the clones, they don't know they're even clones, but they've been switched out. And so, in these conferences and things like that, I don't go because there have been people within those that have been switched out. And, over long term, we can start noticing the way they talk and what they talk about and the things they say is no longer making sense, because the truth makes sense. It fits together. You hear one person talking about things, it fits in with things. If you do your research, it all fits together. But the lies, even though they're vast in their, they don't fit. It doesn't, like if you look at 911 and you look at the speed at the towers fell, it's not possible, because it's actually, in one case, faster than free fall. It's faster than a brick falling in a vacuum or in the atmosphere. You drop a brick, the building beat it down because it's being sucked down into its footprint by the nanothermite and the pyrotechnic. So it's being pulled faster than gravity can pull it in. So this collapsing and all this, like Building 7, that's why they say they're going to pull it. That's the term in demolitions. And so, the falling narrative, the lie of that doesn't fit. And of course, if you're looking, the lie that was plain in this, well, then why'd 7 come down? So if you're thinking logically and you say, well, this and this, certain things can't add up. It's just like we see with a jab where, when I went to the dentist and I told the dental assistant, I had red pill both of them. I said, I hope you guys, winter's coming now. It's going to get really cold, so I hope you have a jacket and wear that when you go out, because I don't want to freeze to death. If you don't wear a jacket, I might freeze to death, because that's the same logic we see with the jab. If everybody has it and one person doesn't, everybody who has it is threatened by the other person who doesn't have it. Well, what's the point of it then? If it doesn't protect you from somebody who doesn't have it, doesn't protect you from getting variations and all kinds of other stuff, and it's not even stopping the original, supposedly. Why would you want to get it if, there's all kinds of side effects? I mean, obviously you wouldn't. So the lies never mesh together. The truth always comes out if you're a rational, logically thinking, reasonably intelligent person and with an open mind. And the same thing goes when you're dealing with clones. As you've known that person a while, they start to not fit the pattern you're familiar with that person. Radical differences in their behavior, the things that they agree and don't agree with you, the way they in the relationship, they get way more aggressive. way less, like you said, they don't have any empathy.
So let's say now they've created a clone and they want to move that person's consciousness, from the original body into the clone. How do they do that?
They have had this technology, and it was actually, again, they always use long-range preconditioning. So the movies always show this. There was a original the original Star Trek series in which Captain Kirk and another doctor, a lady, went into a machine they found on another planet. She took him unconscious and switched her consciousness with his, so that she was in his body and he was in hers. And so they've had this ability to switch consciousness from body to body. They can switch one and the other at the same time, or they can have, a body, the clone body, and take the consciousness and move it. For them, it's immortality. And actually, originally, up until the after 1990s, I think it was 1997, the portals they were using in the space program actually did not transfer the body. It cloned the body. It made a copy. It disintegrated the body at one side and then recomposed a new body from energy into matter, and then transferred the consciousness through the portal. What was the only thing really going through was information and the energy. So there was no actual transfer of changing the matter of the body into energy, transferring it to the other side, and reassembling it. They tore it apart and then reassembled a new one at the other end. And the consciousness, which is energy, was transferred into the new body, but it didn't have a clone. It didn't have a soul. So now again, it's a clone. It's another type of clone. It's a portal clone. Kind of like the Robotoid clones, pretty much the same thing. It's essentially a Robotoid, but it has no soul now. And so up until the late 90s, all the people in the space programs, they found that out. And then they were like, wow. And there was a twilight zone in which guy realized that's what was going to happen, and he wouldn't go through the portal. And so now they've upgraded the portals where it's actually, like in Star Trek, I don't want to have my atoms torn apart, thrown across space, reassembled at the other end. That's now what it does.
If you could please explain, Gene, what's the difference between a clone and a real?
Well, again, a clone is actually a copy of the body, and the consciousness moved into it. Or it's just copied, and when you clone, all of the memories can be uploaded onto computer systems and downloaded into the new body. So it's a copy. In the case of the Vril, the body's not copied. The consciousness, the soul, and the original person dies and leaves, and the Vril takes over the body and reanimates it. So the body is the original. But what's in there, the person that you may have known, that could have been your friend or a politician or somebody like this, like Smokey Joe, that's not the original Smokey Joe. That's the consciousness and the energy structure and some of the actual genetic material of a lizard creature thing.
Do you think that the original Sleepy Joe back 10 years ago, for instance, was a real?
Not 10 years ago, no. But if you look at pictures of him back then, this is like really bizarre, because you look at, pictures of who we have now and who we had then, they're not the same. So the Vril took over a clone. So you have a Vril clone, a real clone that's been Vril'd. So now we got a double whammy here.
Wow. So let's talk about, for an example, if they were to take your blood and they were to clone you, can they explain how that clone will be as old as from when the blood was conceived, and how it would look? How old can they get it?
Well, with the space program's technology, not only can they reverse age somebody, they can forward age somebody. So they can take the clone it would be a baby when it first is born, and they can forward the age very, very quickly in a matter of weeks, get it to any age they want it to be. So if they're cloning somebody who's in their 70s or 50s or 30s, they can, in a matter of weeks, get the clone to that correct age.
Right. Do you think that Michael Jackson changed himself so much to protect himself from being cloned?
I would agree with that, yes.
Right, interesting. Now, when a vril or a reptile body snatches a human and takes over that human, which becomes a drone human or a vril, what happens to that? What happens to the vril's human family, mom and dad? Do they then continue the body snatching with their family, or what happens?
Depends on the importance of the individual and their surrounding family. Usually they just do, in the case, they just do the person they need, because the cabal is all about being economically efficient. So they're not going to spend resources where they don't need to. Especially, the Alpha Draco before they left, that's why they left, because it was getting too economically infeasible. The investment was becoming too high for the gains. And so now the remaining few negative groups are the Omicron, for example, and a few others, but the majority are gone now and been cleansed off. And so, with the clones, they don't normally spend money where they don't need to spend money. They're very conscious. And on Michael Jackson, he actually did, from my information, die in the commercial. He burned to death. And so they actually were able to, with the space technology, repair him completely. But at that point, he said he didn't want to be in public anymore. So from there, the Alliance actually put out Clone. And the clone being quantumly entangled is a lot why the changes in the facial structure, the lightening of the skin, the nose falling off, things like that, because it's quantumly tied to the original, and the original still had some so badly damaged. The genetics were damaged that even when they brought him back, there were still some issues.
So let's assume that's correct for argument's sake, and that after that point, it was a clone. Michael Jackson was a clone.
The one we see in public.
The one we see in public. Then whose consciousness is inside of that clone?
In the case of the Alliance, what they do when they use a clone is the person is trained in how to soul project. And so the person will project the body, the original body will be protected, so that, they're by leaving enough of their soul energy in there to protect them. And also there's protection technologies that they can use to help keep the person protected. So there's enough soul in there to protect it from being possessed. And they'll project enough soul into the clone that clone has compassion and understanding and, knowing all of what's going on. The Alliance doesn't do it like the Cabal, where the clone has no soul at all in it.
I'm convinced Michael Jackson was empathetic, and also because the deep state didn't like him for various reasons. And he was, when they framed him for pedophilia, it was all over the media. Whereas with the Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, we see nothing on the media. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's exactly because he was helped by the Alliance. So he's projecting soul into the clone so that it's going to have the same exact personality, same exact behavior, same exact emotion, same exact empathy, everything right down the line. The Cabal is drastically impaired, but it's not incapable still of producing more. They have a lot. They had many facilities. Yeah, they've lost the majority of their major dumps in the U.S. They're losing a lot in Canada. That's why there's a huge thing with now many of the major dumps are run on nuclear power. And so the flooding was done in Canada, weather warfare, to flood out the dumps. But unfortunately, they lost containment on the reactor. It flooded the reactor. And so there's a lot of radiation. And so people need to do radiation protocols in those areas. You can go online and find the monitoring stations and see what the levels are where you live. If you're in those level areas where the levels are high, you want to go to the NIH, National Institute of Health. They have protocols for using iodine for treating yourself. I wouldn't recommend going and running away because right now Canada's borders are locked down. You can't. But additionally, there's many more that may be happening. So, if you can get out of ways from the affected area would be wise. But then additionally, it would be important to use I would say not iodine, but potassium iodide, the Magellan's Direct, and make up the appropriate solution based on the NIH documents so that you can do the radiation protocols which are very viable and very powerful. It's very important that people do that because in affected areas. So, a lot of these dumps are being taken out, and there are, always in war, there's casualty situations. That's a casualty situation that people need to deal with, but they still do have, other facilities. There had so many because they do it everywhere all over the world. The cabal's all over the world. And so they have facilities still.
Now, recently there was on the news that Britney Spears was freed, and I'm not convinced that was the real story. And I've heard that she's also been a victim of cloning. Do you want to tell us what you know about Britney Spears?
Yeah, I still need to research to see if that's the original that got her out of the cage in the dump, because you have the original, then you have the clone, and then of course they Mark Ultra'd all of them. So it's like, which is which?
Right, I see. Absolutely.
They come up from underground different spots all over the world. There's a 1 to 1.5 foot tall one. That's the real type 1.
The type 1s are covered in red diamond shaped scales. Real type 1s are real dumb.
Little dragons, those are the Brill type 1. These lizards have a unique biological property of their bodies.
The lizards have what's called a proboscis.
It's an ejectable brain and spinal column.
The small ones they use to drone people because the proboscis on young lizard type 1s, they're small enough to go into an eye and not ruin the eye.
This top cap thing on the top of their head comes out. They can do this once in their life. It pulls their spinal column along with it. The humans would have to be restrained or unconscious.
The thing squiggles in through the eye. It does a spiral around the optic nerve all the way to a certain point, and it's driven there by taste. And they said once it gets there, it has the taste of butterscotch. It then starts what they call swimming. The spinal cord stuff comes out of the spinal cord, and it's everything that the lizard is. The lizard's whole body is dead, and it can't go back in. It's one way.
The juice that's in the spinal cord gets excreted out of the tip of this thing. They're parasitic cells. The parasitic cells go into the brain.
The old person's consciousness is gone. The body is absolutely, totally dominated, and the lizard is smarter as a human. Over time, it'll develop a rash, it'll lose its hair.
And they're actually deficient. They're dumber than the original person.
And they mimic human behavior, and it knows that its life is dependent on it mimicking human behavior, so it does really well. Even with other animals, it's smart enough to instinctually mimic the animal's behavior. The drones of 100 years ago erased any existence of these real lizards from Egyptian carvings on walls. They would smash them, or books that had anything in them about them, they would burn them.
Hello, Patriots. I just wanted to say thank you to all of those who've been supporting my channel. I really do appreciate it. I couldn't do it without you. And I have a new payment platform called Stripe. If you are interested in supporting the channel with a donation. And thank you again, and I'll see you on the next video.